Imagine standing in a place you know well, a road you've traveled before, a trail you trust, and then suddenly the world erases itself. No horizon, no sky, no ground, just endless white, roaring wind, and the terrifying realization that direction no longer exists. What happens when the storm doesn't just surround you, but consumes you? When visibility drops to nothing, sound bends and distorts, and even your own footprints vanish seconds after you make them. Welcome to the whiteout, where blizzards stop behaving like weather and begin acting like predators. Tonight, you're watching True Terror Files Official, a channel dedicated to uncovering the darkest true horror hidden within our real world. If you're drawn to unexplained disappearances, survival horror, and chilling true accounts that linger long after the screen fades to black, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because what we uncover here is not fiction, it's reality at its most terrifying. Blizzards are often described as beautiful, silent, even peaceful from a distance, but inside them, time fractures, logic dissolves, and survival becomes a fragile illusion. Search and rescue teams often say the same thing after major storms. People don't just get lost, they vanish. No tracks, no signs of struggle, no clear explanation. The snow doesn't merely cover evidence, it rewrites the scene entirely. Tonight, we explore real accounts of individuals who entered blizzards and were never seen again, and those who barely escaped with their lives, haunted by what they experienced beyond the storm's veil. As you listen, ask yourself one chilling question. If the world disappeared around you right now, would you know which way to go? Would the whiteout claim you to? In many documented disappearance cases, one detail repeats with unnerving consistency. The weather changed suddenly. Experienced hikers, hunters, travelers, and even trained outdoorsmen stepped into blizzard conditions, believing they could manage them, only for the storm to dismantle every advantage they had. In whiteout conditions, depth perception collapses, distances stretch or shrink unpredictably, and the human brain, desperate for patterns, begins to betray itself. There are cases where individuals vanished mere yards from shelter, vehicles, or companions, yet left no trail leading away. Search teams arrived within hours, sometimes minutes, only to find nothing but smooth, untouched snow, as if the person had never existed at all. In some cases, personal items were later found far from logical routes, boots placed neatly, clothing folded, or gear scattered in ways that defied hypothermia alone. Investigators often cite disorientation, paradoxical undressing, or exposure, but these explanations fail to address the most disturbing element. How does someone disappear completely in an environment designed to preserve evidence? Snow should record every step, every fall, every struggle, yet blizzards erase faster than we can comprehend. Survivors of similar storms describe the sensation of being led, turned around without realizing it, or compelled to walk in circles while believing they were moving straight ahead. Some reported hearing voices muffled by the wind, or seeing shapes forming briefly in the swirling snow before dissolving again. Whether these were stress-induced hallucinations or something more remains unanswered. But one truth is clear: blizzards don't need claws or teeth to hunt. They confuse, isolate, and strip away certainty until people make one final, fatal decision and vanish into silence. For those who survive blizzards, the horror doesn't end when the storm does. Many recount moments where hope slipped away entirely, where they accepted death as inevitable, only to be saved by chance, instinct, or sheer refusal to stop moving. Survivors describe how hypothermia doesn't arrive screaming, it whispers. First comes exhaustion, then comfort, then the seductive belief that resting for just a moment will fix everything. The cold numbs fear, judgment, and eventually identity itself. Some survivors recall being convinced they were being watched, not in a supernatural sense, but with a primal certainty that something unseen was near, pacing them just beyond visibility. Others describe the silence inside the storm, how wind can suddenly drop, leaving an unnatural stillness that feels heavier than the noise. In these moments, people lose track of time, memory fragments, and decision-making becomes dangerously unreliable. Those who escaped often did so after abandoning logic, entirely following gut instincts they couldn't explain, turning back for no reason, or collapsing just as rescuers arrived. What separates survivors from the vanished may come down to minutes, meters, or mental resilience that can't be measured. And that's what makes these disappearances so terrifying. Many victims did everything right. They were prepared, they were cautious, they were experienced, and still, the storm nearly erased them. So what happened to the ones who didn't come back? Did they simply make one wrong choice, or did the blizzard push them towards something they never saw coming? When survival stories cross into something stranger, the narrative shifts from natural disaster to true horror. Across multiple accounts, survivors report phenomena that defy simple explanation: lights moving within storms where visibility should be zero, footsteps that don't match their own, and the overwhelming sensation of being followed or guided. Some describe hearing their names called, distorted by wind, yet unmistakably familiar. Others recall seeing tall, dark shapes standing motionless in the snow, visible for only seconds before vanishing entirely. Psychologists attribute these experiences to sensory deprivation, stress, and hypothermia, but the consistency of certain details across unrelated accounts raises unsettling questions. Why do so many people describe the same feelings of presence? Why do some survivors insist the storm felt aware, reactive to their movements? Indigenous folklore from cold regions often warns of entities tied to blizzards, spirits that lure travelers off safe paths, feeding on confusion and isolation. Whether one believes in such explanations or not, these stories force us to confront an uncomfortable idea. Extreme environments don't just challenge the body, they fracture perception itself. And in those fractures, the line between reality and something far more disturbing becomes dangerously thin. Perhaps the most chilling thought is this: if something did happen beyond our understanding, the blizzard would be the perfect accomplice, erasing every trace, leaving behind only questions buried beneath the snow. Blizzards remind us that nature doesn't need intention to be lethal. Yet the unanswered disappearances suggest there's more happening than cold and wind alone. These storms strip away modern safety, technology, and confidence, returning humans to a state of raw vulnerability where survival depends on fragile decisions made under impossible conditions. The people who vanished weren't reckless, thrill-seekers. They were ordinary individuals caught in extraordinary circumstances, swallowed by environments that refuse to explain themselves. As the snow settles and the world reappears, the absence remains louder than any storm. What truly happens when visibility drops to nothing and the world becomes a blank page? Is it simply human error magnified by extreme weather, or does the whiteout conceal forces we've yet to understand? We leave that question with you. If you've ever experienced a blizzard, a whiteout, or an unexplained moment in extreme weather, share your story or theory in the comments. Your voice may help piece together what the snow keeps hidden. And if you want more real survival horror, unexplained disappearances, and true stories that exist at the edge of understanding, subscribe to True Terror Files. Official because the most terrifying mysteries aren't imagined, they're waiting silent and unseen just beyond the storm. Imagine the deepest forest you've ever seen, a place where the trees stand like ancient guardians and silence feels sacred. Now imagine that same forest erased in seconds, swallowed by a blizzard so violent it steals the horizon, muffles sound, and turns direction into a dangerous illusion. What happens when the wilderness you've sworn to protect becomes unrecognizable, hostile, and suffocatingly close? Tonight, you're watching True Terror Files Official, where we document real survival horror, unexplained encounters, and the terrifying truths hidden inside nature's most unforgiving environments. If stories of real people facing the unknown fascinate you, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because these are not legends, they're lived experiences. Forest rangers are trained to endure isolation, extreme weather, and long stretches without human contact. But even the most seasoned veterans admit there is something uniquely unsettling about a whiteout. When snow and wind merge into a living wall, the forest doesn't just disappear, it feels like it's holding its breath. Rangers describe how the familiar trails, landmarks, and instincts they rely on suddenly fail, replaced by a creeping awareness that the storm controls everything. Tonight, veteran rangers share their most harrowing, true blizzard encounters moments when the whiteout felt intelligent, oppressive, and deeply wrong. As you listen, consider this unsettling thought: when visibility drops to nothing, and sound bends and fades, how would you know if you were truly alone? One ranger recounts what became known among his colleagues as the Lost Cabin Incident, a routine winter patrol that unraveled into a psychological nightmare. As the storm intensified, visibility collapsed to arm's length, forcing him to abandon his planned route and search for a nearby emergency shelter he'd visited dozens of times before. But in the whiteout, distance became meaningless. He walked for what felt like hours, only to circle back to the same fallen tree again and again, each return eroding his confidence and sense of time. Then came the light's vent, flickering glows that appeared between the trees, too steady to be reflections, too deliberate to be imagined. Each time he moved toward them, they drifted farther away, pulling him deeper into unfamiliar terrain. Another ranger tells of the unseen presence, a night patrol cut short by an unexpected storm surge. Alone and miles from the nearest outpost, she became aware of footsteps pacing her movement, not matching her rhythm, not breaking through snow as an animal would. The sensation of being watched grew overwhelming, pressing against her thoughts until she questioned every sound, every shadow forming briefly in the swirling white. The third account, whispered even years later, involves the frozen sentinel, a discovery made after the storm cleared. What they found, half buried in the snow, defied any known explanation. Something shaped too deliberately to be natural, frozen in place, as if left behind intentionally. None of the rangers involved ever spoke publicly about it again, but within ranger circles, the story is treated with quiet reverence and unease. These weren't inexperienced hikers, they were professionals, trained to survive, and still the whiteout nearly claimed them. Surviving the blizzard doesn't mean escaping it. Rangers speak openly about how these experiences followed them long after the snow melted. The psychological toll of being isolated inside a whiteout lingers in subtle, destructive ways: hypervigilance, sleep disturbances, sudden panic in quiet snowfall. Many describe struggling to trust their senses again, especially in low visibility environments. Hypothermia is often described as a physical threat, but rangers emphasize its mental deception, the warmth that creeps in just before collapse. the calm that convinces you to stop moving, the voice in your head telling you rest is safe. Survival, they say, often depended on breaking protocol and trusting instincts that defied logic. Some sang aloud to stay grounded. Others spoke to themselves constantly to anchor their thoughts, while a few admitted they followed an internal pull they couldn't explain. Among rangers, there exists what they call the code of the Whiteout. Unwritten rules learned through hard experience. Never trust distance. Never assume silence means safety, and never ignore the feeling that something is wrong. These lessons aren't taught in manuals. They're passed quietly between veterans, often after near-fatal encounters. The storm doesn't just test the body, it dismantles the mind. Blizzards are not static events. They are dynamic, destructive systems that reshape the landscape in minutes. Rangers describe watching entire structures vanish beneath snowdrifts, trees snapping under invisible weight, and trails erased as if they never existed. Communication failures are common, turning minor injuries into life-threatening situations. Radios die, GPS becomes unreliable, and landmarks lose meaning. The forest, once expansive, feels claustrophobic, pressing in from all sides. Rangers warn that isolation during a blizzard amplifies every risk: cold, fatigue, fear, and doubt. Frostbite arrives silently. Hypothermia clouds judgment, and disorientation leads people away from safety without them realizing it. One step off a known route can mean the difference between survival and disappearance. And then there is the silence moment, when the wind stops entirely, leaving an unnatural stillness that many describe as the most frightening part. In that silence, thoughts grow louder, fear sharpens, and the sense of being observed intensifies. Nature doesn't announce its danger, it waits. Looking back, each ranger shares the same conclusion: the Whiteout demands respect, humility, and preparation beyond confidence or experience. These encounters reshaped how they viewed fear, not as weakness, but as a survival signal, and resilience, not as strength, but as adaptability. They emphasize that the wilderness doesn't need to be supernatural to be terrifying, yet it often feels like something more when stripped of familiarity. The final message is clear: never underestimate winter, never ignore intuition, and never assume the forest is passive. If these true ranger stories chilled you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to True Terror Files Official for more real survival horror and unexplained encounters from the edges of human experience. And tell us in the comments what's the most terrifying moment you've ever faced in nature. Because the storm may fade, but its echoes never truly disappear. Picture a road that shouldn't exist, carved across frozen lakes and endless tundra, where one wrong move sends thousands of pounds of steel through the ice and into black water below. Now imagine driving that road alone, surrounded by nothing but darkness, wind, and a blizzard so thick your headlights feel swallowed whole. What happens when exhaustion sets in? The world narrows to a tunnel of white, and something appears ahead that shouldn't be there at all. Tonight, you're watching True Terror Files Official, the channel where real people share true survival horror, unexplained encounters, and chilling stories from the edges of human endurance. If true stories from isolated places grip your imagination, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because the most frightening encounters don't happen in haunted houses. They happen where help can't reach you. Ice road truckers operate in conditions most people will never experience. Brutal cold, constant risk, and isolation so complete it feels unreal. Many drivers say the environment itself begins to feel alive, pressing against the cab, testing nerves and perception. In these conditions, the mind becomes both your greatest tool and your biggest liability. Tonight, we explore true accounts from ice road truckers who encountered things they still can't explain: phantom vehicles, ghostly figures, and eerie signals emerging from the whiteout. As you listen, ask yourself this unsettling question: when you're alone on a frozen road with no witnesses, how do you know what you're seeing is real? Long hours behind the wheel, relentless vibration, low light, and constant danger create the perfect storm for fear to take root. Medical experts explain that sensory deprivation and exhaustion can cause the brain to fill in gaps, but ice road truckers insist some encounters go far beyond fatigue. Drivers tell of shapes forming in the snowbanks that move independently of the wind, silhouettes standing motionless at the edge of the road, and figures that vanish the moment high beams lock onto them. One veteran driver describes seeing what looked like a man walking directly toward his truck in the middle of a frozen lake. No gear, no vehicle, no footprints behind him. Another recalls faces appearing briefly in the blowing snow, pale and indistinct, gone before he could even react. These sightings often happen during the most dangerous moments: whiteout conditions, where stopping is impossible and visibility is measured in seconds. Psychologists argue these experiences may be stress-induced hallucinations, but drivers point out something unsettling. Many of them describe the same details without ever comparing stories: the same distances, the same movements, the same overwhelming sense of being watched. When the CB radio crackles with static and the world outside dissolves into white, the line between imagination and something far darker begins to blur. Some of the most chilling accounts involve vehicles that don't exist or shouldn't. Ice road truckers speak of headlights appearing ahead, pacing them for miles, only to vanish without a turnoff, track, or explanation. Others describe being overtaken by trucks that make no sound, leave no trail, and disappear into the storm as if absorbed by it. One driver recalls following a convoy through a blizzard, relieved to have others on the road, only to realize moments later that his radio calls were unanswered, and when the storm lifted, the road ahead was completely empty. Even more disturbing are reports of phantom CB transmissions, distress calls from drivers who don't exist, coordinates that lead nowhere, and voices repeating warnings before cutting to static. These experiences mirror old vanishing hitchhiker legends, but on a frozen highway where stopping could mean death. Are these echoes of past tragedies, stress-induced auditory hallucinations, or something imprinted into the landscape itself? Truckers often say the ice remembers every crack, every loss, every life claimed by the road, and on the loneliest nights, it seems to speak back. Long before ice roads and diesel engines, these frozen regions were crossed by indigenous peoples who passed down stories of spirits tied to the land. Some truckers, especially those who've driven the same routes for decades, admit they've come to respect these stories more than they expected. Near certain stretches of roadofan close to historically significant or sacred areas, drivers report sudden drops in temperature, overwhelming dread, or equipment malfunction without explanation. Some describe seeing towering shapes moving parallel to the road, too large for animals, keeping pace effortlessly. Others speak of the Wendigo phenomenon, not as a creature, but as a presence, an oppressive hunger or madness that creeps in during extreme isolation. Whether cultural interpretation or psychological response, the experiences share common ground. The land feels aware, the storm feels intentional, and the road feels like a boundary between worlds. Even skeptical drivers admit there are places where they won't stop, no matter how tired they are, because something about the area feels deeply wrong. Across all these stories, one truth stands out. The ice road doesn't forgive, and it doesn't explain itself. Blizzards strip away comfort, certainty, and logic, leaving drivers alone with their thoughts and whatever else might be out there. Are these encounters products of exhaustion and fear, or do extreme environments open doors to things we barely understand? Perhaps isolation amplifies ancient fears, or perhaps some places carry echoes that surface only when conditions are right. We've heard about phantom trucks, ghostly figures, unexplained voices, and an overwhelming sense of being watched, and every driver who shared these stories insists on one thing: it felt real. As you think back on these encounters, ask yourself, if you were alone on a frozen road, surrounded by whiteout and silence, would you trust your eyes or your instincts? If these true ice road trucker stories sent a chill down your spine, like this video and subscribe to True Terror Files Official for more real survival horror and unexplained encounters from the most isolated places on Earth. And tell us in the comments, do you believe these experiences are psychological, paranormal, or something we've yet to understand? Because on the ice road, the storm may pass, but the unseen never truly leaves.